Welcome to Silberman Law Firm's Weekly Docket, episode 12, where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is April 4th, 2024. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host, and I'm joined by Austin Black, my co-host. How are you doing today, Austin?
Doing well, a little bit hungry on a new diet, but we're getting there. So
you're hungry for a great podcast.
Absolutely. Famished for a great podcast, yes.
What's on our docket today, Austin?
Our legal news section, we're first going to talk about the Trump hush money case. And secondarily, there was a Fort Worth woman who was convicted for 5 years for voter fraud, which was recently overturned. And then going over our legal questions, first off, whether land can be landlocked and who is allowed to see a will after someone dies. And then our rant and rave section, I think this is something both myself and Phil are quite passionate about, which is when and what to tip in what countries and what cultures and what states. Going over all that, so we got a packed show today.
I'm excited about the tipping thing. That has really plagued me for several years now.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and start with our legal news. And the first story we're covering is Trump loses the motion to delay hush money trial. So Trump is being criminally prosecuted in the state of New York related to paying hush money to a porn star by the name of Stormy Daniels. And the amount of money was $130,000 in exchange for Stormy's silence. By the way, Stormy is not her real name. I've forgotten her real name, but paying $130,000 for Stormy's silence in 2016 related to a sexual encounter that occurred in 2006. So Trump was running for president in 2016. He didn't want the relationship with the porn star to get out, paid her $130,000 to keep it quiet. So
her name is Stephanie Clifford, by the way. That's her legal name.
Stephanie Clifford. Okay. I'm still going to call her Stormy.
I think most people do.
So is paying hush money illegal, Austin?
Not in and of itself. No, it is not.
That's the right answer. There are many cases in the American judicial system where we I wouldn't say encourage, but it's completely legal to pay hush money. We've got two examples here. We deal with these all the time in our law practice, non-disclosure agreements. Mm-hmm. So if someone's getting ready to sell a business and there's a prospective buyer, maybe the seller wants to keep the terms of the business confidential. So that prospective buyer is going to sign an NDA to be able to evaluate the business. And completely legal. Another example is confidential settlement agreements. You're obviously an attorney for the firm, Austin. You do settlement agreements. Have you done any settlement agreements where the terms are confidential?
Every single one I've done, the terms are confidential. And it's a pretty standard clause to have a confidential settlement agreement. People don't really, if you settle with someone, they don't really want that to be out there. They don't want to, if they're constantly involved in litigation, they don't want to know what the going rate is for their settlement, all that sort of stuff.
And you were not worried at any time that your client or you were going to be criminally liable for confidential settlement agreement, correct?
No, I was not.
So I looked this up because it was just interesting to me. A history of presidents and important people that have historically paid hush money. And we have a list. Thomas Jefferson, to cover up the affair with Sally Hemings, who was an enslaved woman, and they had children together. By the way, I heard that they actually loved each other. Did you? I think there's a book about it.
When it comes to things like that, I always take them with 500 grains of salt, right? Because there are people trying to push an agenda so much about the lives of the founding fathers. But I have heard that. Yes, I've heard it. It's true.
There was some hush money there, and maybe they loved each other, maybe they didn't. It's hard to say. Fair
and they loved.
Sometimes my wife wants some hush money.
Sure, that's different. That's a little bit different.
All right, Alexander Hamilton. Have you seen the play Hamilton?
I have. I am a huge fan of Alexander Hamilton's ideas.
Okay, tell us, give us a breakdown of Maria Reynolds. Do you remember that from the play and the history?
Alexander Hamilton was married to one of two sisters. It's a big part of the play. And then he cheats on her with Miss Reynolds. And there's a big song about it. It's a great play. If you have time, I'd recommend going to see it. But yes, he did pay hush money for her. And the affair was brought to light as part of trying to smear Alexander Hamilton's name during an election cycle. And he tried, also the fact that he paid her to try to cover it up. So quite similar to today. So, yeah.
And Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, thus far, both hush money payers. And we're not saying this is right, by the way. This is just historical reference. Warren Harding, I learned today, I knew Warren Harding was a president. I didn't know he was the 29th president. But he had an affair with someone by the name of Nan Britton, and he paid some hush money.
Yep.
And then we've got next on the list, Richard Nixon. Now, this was not for an affair. This was to cover up the Watergate scandal.
There may have been an affair involved there. I don't know.
And that probably was illegal because it was associated with an underlying crime, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. Which is the same thing that's related to Trump here, right?
Yeah. So there's some historical precedent for presidents and important people paying hush money. And we're not saying that's correct. We mentioned Trump in a previous episode, and he's not a saint. He's not Mother Teresa. He's committed some wrongs for certain. All right, so what is Trump actually being prosecuted for? The answer is New York Penal Code Section 175.10 for falsifying business records. So by itself, falsifying business records in the state of New York is actually a misdemeanor. But it becomes a felony when combined with some other underlying crime. And here are the prosecutor's theories. One, the payment of the $130,000 to Stormy Daniels was associated with an illegal campaign contribution. Now, I don't fully understand how that was because he was paying her the money. I assume the $130 did not come from campaign donations.
That's what I thought the argument was. I thought they had evidence to show, and to be clear, I'm just spitballing here. I don't know that's for sure. But from what I've read, I thought that the allegation was that the 130 actually came from campaign donations.
Okay, to me, that's a problem if that has occurred. If I donate $130,000 to a political campaign and the guy uses it to pay a porn star, I've got a problem with that.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I think it should be criminally prosecuted. But no, that almost sounds like too stupid, right? Are you really that stupid?
I mean, I actually do think that he is that stupid. Anyone who thinks that Trump is playing 4D chess, I don't know.
Maybe he's not like the world's most genius man, but surely you're not stupid enough to use the campaign money. You could have used you could have just used your personal funds for the $130,000. All right. So theory 2 of trying to make this a felony is the payment violated New York tax law by falsifying the records to Michael Cohen, who was his attorney. Now I can only assume that the theory there is I paid Michael Cohen $130,000 and then I expensed it as a business expense. That was the tax fraud, but that seems really stupid too.
Yeah, I agree. Both of those sound stupid. I don't put them past Trump, but my opinions.
I don't think there's anything wrong with giving $130,000 to your attorney. As attorneys, yeah, we're lawyers. Give us your
please.
But the $130,000 as lawyers, we have trust accounts. In Texas, it's called an IOLTA, an interest on lawyers' trust account. And the money goes into our trust account. It's not our money. We have a fiduciary obligation to protect it. And then we can pay out people that our clients direct us to pay. If Trump gives Michael Cohen the money and Michael Cohen pays it to Stormy for hush money, that's completely okay. I guess the state of New York is going to show some evidence that maybe Trump expensed it. That would not be a proper business expense.
No.
So if you're an executive and you pay a porn star, I'm not saying Apple executives, Google executives do any of this stuff. But if an Apple executive pays a porn star, Apple does not get to deduct that on their business tax return. So
unless, of course, your business is paying porn stars for individuals.
That is true. If you're that kind of media company.
Yes.
I don't necessarily condone either. But the bottom line is Trump tried to delay the trial, and the judge said, no, this is going to try, and we're going to see how this plays out. And this is probably the only Trump legal matter that is going to try before the election. So that's a big deal.
Sure.
Let's move on to our next story. Texas Appeals Court overturns 5-year sentence for illegal vote. This story got my attention because I do have some libertarian tendencies. I'm not a big fan of putting people in jail for paper crimes. Crystal Mason from Fort Worth was on supervised release for felony tax fraud. She's a black lady, and she's a mother of 3. She filled out a provisional ballot in the 2016 election, and the Tarrant County District Attorney decided to prosecute her for voter fraud, saying, hey, you're a convicted felon, and because you're a convicted felon, you should know that you're not allowed to vote. And the Tarrant County DA said, we sent you a letter telling you couldn't vote as a convicted felon. She said, I was actually in jail, so I didn't get it. And the district court strings her up and gives her 5 years. So my question is, what is Tarrant County thinking on this deal? And I'm a lawyer. I believe in law and order. I believe if people do crimes, they should go to jail. But there are some things that strike me as just a huge injustice. What was Tarrant County thinking? One, they're probably trying to right the world's wrongs on voter fraud. Tarrant County, I assume, is still mostly a conservative Republican county. Assume that's true.
I grew up there.
Okay, so they probably believe that the Democrats are getting all kinds of felons and dead people to vote.
Yes. That's correct.
So we are going to take this one lady and make an example out of her.
Crystal Mason was
Crystal Mason.
This district court judge was righting all the wrongs of voter fraud in one fell sweep.
He's going to pin it on this lady. Now, she's not, like, Trump is not a saint. Trump's not Mother Teresa. I'm sure Crystal Mason is not Mother Teresa either. Okay. But
sure,
I don't think Crystal Mason deserves 5 years for vote fraud. Maybe Tarrant County's racist. I have a statistic. This is a federal statistic I found by the United States Sentencing Commission. Says that black males receive 19.1% longer sentences than white males. Crystal was a black woman, not a black man, but the idea being
that we know of.
Right? Maybe there was a racial component to it.
I'm sure there was a racial component, honestly.
Yeah. I don't care if she did commit voter fraud. I never want a mother of 3 to go to prison for that kind of thing. I think it does more societal harm than good. And again, mom committed tax fraud. All right. Maybe she did know she was committing voter fraud. Don't know. But I'm not a fan of putting this kind of person in jail for a minute paper crime. There are better ways to solve a voter fraud problem than trying to do it this way. So thankfully, the appellate court overturned the conviction and acquitted her. So the appellate court said there was not enough evidence that she knew she could not vote. So certain crimes require a mental knowing or element to be convicted of them. Are you familiar with the term mens rea, Austin?
I don't think I could have passed the bar exam without being familiar with the term mens rea, or at least criminal law.
Now, you and I are not criminal lawyers.
Oh.
But tell the listeners what mens rea is.
The mental state to commit the act. For instance, first-degree murder has to be intentional. You got to be trying to murder that person. You got the mens rea of trying to murder that person.
The Latin literally translates to guilty mind. You have to know what you're doing. You have to do it intentionally. Court said, no, government, you did not beyond a reasonable doubt prove that she knew she was voting illegally.
No, it's interesting. I actually was not aware, because to be clear for listeners, some crimes don't require a certain mens rea, right? For instance, if you are driving over the speed limit, right? Doesn't matter if you knew what the speed limit was or not.
Yeah, and Austin's example of speeding is a great example. Those are what we call strict liability crimes. So if you get pulled over, don't tell. The worst thing you can say is, officer, I didn't know I was speeding.
No.
You should just state in the affirmative, officer, I was going the speed limit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Strict liability speeding, mens rea, you have to have some kind of knowledge of what you're doing. Tax fraud, interestingly, is also a crime that requires mens rea. You have to know as a taxpayer that you're committing a crime. You can't just accidentally commit tax fraud. But don't think you can just claim a bunch of income and say, I didn't know. At some point, the jury is going to find that unbelievable and hold you guilty of tax fraud. My favorite tax fraud example is Willie Nelson from 1990, who owed $17.6 million in taxes. And that's a lot of money in today's dollars. And Willie was going to go to jail, and the argument of, hey, I didn't know that I was supposed to claim all that income was not going to work. Now, if you're a common taxpayer and you're doing some complicated vehicle depreciation, then maybe you can get away with saying, I didn't know how to depreciate that vehicle. That's a lot more believable. It's complex. Sure. By the way, Austin, you know how Willie got out of that deal?
How?
He released a record or some tapes called the IRS tape. Who will buy my memories? And it was brilliant because he's like, he owed $17 million, couldn't pay it back. All of his fans banded together, bought all of his memorabilia, okay, raised the $17 million. He was able to pay the IRS back in 3 years, stay out of jail, and then all the fans gave him the stuff back.
That is so funny, man. Very loyal fans, I suppose. By the way, that money, the IRS, $40 million today.
$40 million in today's dollars, people. Willie got out of it.
So his fans bought $40 million worth of memorabilia and then gave back that $40 million.
Gave it back, and they love Willie. All right, people, look, if you're trying to keep $18 million, $17 million from the IRS, they're going to get you on the mens rea. Look, this lady gets the right result as far as I'm concerned. She doesn't go to jail. I hope she keeps her nose clean, stays out of trouble. Whatever, she didn't deserve 5 years for voter fraud. All right, let's answer some legal questions. Can real estate be landlocked in Texas?
You think people know what landlocked means? Some people, I think, don't. So if you don't know what landlocked means, it just means you can't access your property, okay? So if someone owns the property all around it, someone owns all of the access points to your property, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's an island, right? It could be just a piece of property in the middle of all these other pieces of property that are private property you can't travel over. It's landlocked. That's what that means. Yeah.
All right, so landlocked parcels. In Texas, absolutely, you can have a landlocked parcel. And most of the calls we get on these are from people that buy these at tax auctions or some other type of auctions, and they think they're getting this great deal on a lot, and they go out there to visit it after buying it, and they're like, how do I get to it? Because it's surrounded by other properties. And then they call us, and they're like, hey, I bought this landlocked parcel. Can you help me? And there are some things we can do when we get those calls. The first thing we try is to attempt to find an easement theory. And the most common easement theories that we use are one, easement by necessity, which is the parcel had to have been part of a bigger parcel. So it all had to be one piece of land.
Yep.
And then it was later split.
Owned by the same person, one piece of land owned by the same person.
Yeah. One piece of land owned by the same person, later split, and the landlocked parcel is a necessity for access.
Yeah.
So that's one theory.
Because those two were together, so obviously you needed one to access the other. It would make sense that there should be an easement there. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other theory we try to help people that get landlocked parcels is a prescriptive easement, which is basically like adverse possession. Your piece of land had been landlocked all these years, but maybe somebody was walking across somebody else's property and they had done it for so many years, it has to be 10 years.
Sure.
And it was permission from the adjacent neighbor property owner. And you have this easement by prescription because for 10 years you've accessed the property. So that's another easement theory. There are some other easement theories that we try to apply that we won't get into for purposes of the link show. But that's a good option. Another option is you can just attempt to negotiate with the neighbors.
Yeah.
Now, that might not go well.
And to be clear, at least for me, when I'm approaching these situations, I do try that first, right? Now, sometimes there's already a hostile relationship between the two. It's not going to get anywhere. But if there's no correspondence at all thus far, we'll try to talk to them and be like, hey, can we work out something?
Negotiating with the adjacent neighbors is a good solution, although sometimes they know you need something from them. And that's going to because you need, and they're the only one that can supply just by the laws of supply and demand, they're going to quote you some really high prices for an easement.
Sure.
Or you can try to sell the parcel to the neighbor that does have access, but then that's the problem. The neighbor is going to want to pay a very low price because they're the only one that it's valuable. Mm-hmm. All right, so moving on to our next legal question. Who is allowed to see a will after someone dies? So this happens all the time. We can call this one, show me the will. Dies, and we get a call from a child or someone who thinks they might be in the will. It says, hey, I know that my brother is in possession of the will and he won't show it to me. What do I do?
There are a few things you can do. But legally, they're supposed to show it. They're supposed to deposit it with the county clerk's office in the county where the person passed away, making the will public. They're supposed to do that. It's part of the Estates Code. Okay, Estates Code section 252.201. Right? They're supposed to do that. Absolutely. If they don't do that, a lot of times they won't. If there is sometimes like family members like, no, I have the will and I'm not showing it to you. Happens quite frequently. We get calls about that all the time. I'm sure you've had some of them, yeah?
Yeah, all the time. We will, if push comes to shove, we'll go down to the probate court and we'll file an action to have the judge force that person, bring the will down to the county clerk and deposit it for public records. But per the Estates Code, anyone in possession of a will after someone dies absolutely must put it on deposit in the county clerk records.
Absolutely.
Per the law. Now, that's only if someone dies. Mm-hmm. If it turns out the person is still alive, there is no obligation for a living person to show their will to anybody.
Yeah.
Now, we do get another common question somewhat related to this. Oftentimes, we'll prepare a will for someone and they'll say, what do I do with it? Should I go put it on deposit with the county clerk at that time?
Yeah.
And there is an option to do that, but we don't recommend that.
Yeah.
So we don't like it because, one, now you're making your will public prior to your death, and that can get a little uncomfortable for people that might not like that will.
Sure.
And it can also create a problem if you later decide to revoke it and you do another will, and you've got this other will out there in the county clerk's record. So
county clerk could lose your will. That wouldn't be.
If you have a will, just keep it in a safe place. Tell the executor you named where it is. Now, sometimes the usual case is you've got the widow who's the second wife who's in possession of the will, and the will is good for the kids. And the kids call us and say, hey, stepmom has the will and won't give it to us. And we send a letter over to stepmom saying deposit the will with the county clerk. And stepmom's response conveniently is, oh, he tore that will up. And of course she's
or what will? What will?
And of course she's over there, and she burned the will and it, and good luck with that, because now we've got an evidentiary issue trying to prove that she actually had it and destroyed it. But
yeah.
All right, let's go on and get to my favorite section of the show, our rants and raves. And today we're talking about tips. Sincere. We are so confused on when to tip, how much to tip, and maybe, Austin, you can help educate me, and our listeners might be able to chime in the comments and tell us how they tip and when to tip. So I've got some examples here, and we'll just go through them one by one, and I'll ask you. All right, Austin, sit-down restaurants. You just traditional sit-down restaurant. This is easy, right? How much are you supposed to tip, Austin?
20%.
20%. So when I was growing up, that was always told it was 15%, but somehow that was raised to 20.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard 20% for as long as I've been. From when it became a consideration for me, it's been 20%. So yeah.
Okay. Many of you listening to this, I think, will remember that it used to be 15, but then somehow we've crept up to 20. When I go to a nice sit-down restaurant, I tip 20%. Now, if the service is bad, Austin, do you still tip 20%?
Hard. It has to be really bad for me not to tip 20%. Like, I think I've, like, in probably 10 years of remembering, like, eating out at a sit-down restaurant where I'm paying, I think I remember one time where I didn't. And that is bad.
It's got to be pretty egregious. You
Yeah.
hear all those arguments, so it's not necessarily the server's fault. Maybe the kitchen was behind and all that kind of stuff. How about the counter service restaurants where they bring the food to you, you go order it, they give you a number, you sit down and you get your own drink and they bring it to you. What's the tip? Is that still 20%?
No.
Or
No.
Is it 10? Is it 0 or is it 10%?
I tip 10% if anything. So
how about to go at a nice table service restaurant where you would normally go to eat and sit down, but you're not feeling like going to a restaurant tonight, so you just want to go pick up the food. Is that the same, 0, 10%, or do you feel like you get paid tip 20%?
0, 10%. Yeah.
Now, a lot of people argue that restaurant is core business is table service, and they're boxing up the food, and that's different than just a restaurant's core business, who is to do the casual service. That doesn't persuade you to go 20%?
Not really. Like, the way I see it is like them coming around. Sure, they're boxing up the food, but any place where you order something to go is going to have to do the same thing too. Like for instance, like if you're getting to go like at Pizza Hut or something, like they have to box up the pizza. So
you don't tip anything at Domino's Pizza Hut.
If it's carry out, if I'm coming and I'm picking it up, no, I don't. Yeah.
I agree with that. It really irks me that Domino's asks for a tip. I think Domino's at one time had a promotion about be your own delivery driver, but then you go to Domino's and you pick up a pizza and it will ask you for a tip. In the old days, they would have a tip jar and it would be a receipt and you'd have to sign. And what I would do is I would just sign and pretend that you forgot a tip. And that was, I just signed and see the place for the tip, right?
My bad.
Not anymore. Now they've got the screen. And what they do is they turn the screen around to you, or they say, okay, it's going to ask you a question before it lets you pay. And what it's doing is it's going to ask you for a tip, but the assumption is they can't say the word tip. The cashier can't say the word tip because that lacks tact. So that what they say is it's going to ask you a question because that sounds better.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, Austin Black, what you're saying you do is you stare them directly in the eye.
Directly in the eye.
And you hit 0%. And then continue to give them a stare down.
Exactly.
Does the cashier know whether or not you're adding a tip immediately, or there's some debate whether the point of sale software tells them or not. So maybe it does. Yeah.
I don't think that'd be beneficial for them either way, though, right? Like for the company, I don't think it'd be helpful for them if it tells them immediately if the person tipped or not.
Be honest about this. Does it change if you're with somebody? Because when you go up to order your food and turn the screen around, and you're on business interview, business lunch, or first date.
Yeah.
You don't want to be that guy who tips 0. Does it change?
It depends on the person I'm with, I think. Yeah. It depends on the person I'm with. If I think that this person, if for some reason I'm worried about like first impressions of this person, I think they might have some preconceived notions about this, that I might just play it safe and like tip $2 or something. But if I don't really care about the person, I'm just 0 still.
I want the person I'm with to know who I am. So I'm just going to tip 0%.
I do too, but I don't want to set up walls at the beginning, right?
So if it's a stumbling block, if the tipping is a stumbling block, and then months later into the relationship, you can say, I want you to know I'm not really a tipper.
Yeah.
All right, what about valets? How much do you tip for a valet?
Valet, I don't use valets very often, but when I do, I try to tip them a decent amount. I think the last time I used a valet, I tipped him 10. So
a lot of money for a valet. 5 is like my max on a valet. And I was with a buddy of mine last night, and he was telling me about his wife, and she was vicious. She would tell her husband, "I'll crumple up $1 or the fold."
Yeah,
like you've got $2 and you fold it because you hope you can't tell that it's only $2.
Sure.
But here's the folded $2.
Yeah. I get that.
The tipping guilt is easier with valet. You give them the crumpled up, folded $2, and then you get in and drive away quickly. My wife knows to get in really quickly. So the problem is when you have kids. If I've got three or four of my kids with me, and my youngest is 3 years old, it's a hole to do to put her in the car, strap her up.
Sure.
So you can't do the $2 fold so easily because then the guy's looking at you like, hey, you give me $2, but you got to take 20 minutes to get your kids in the car. So in that case, you probably really need to give them the $5 or $10.
Yeah.
All right. Tipping in Italy. This one really burned me up. So recently, Italy is so full of Americans. The restaurateurs in Italy now are if they see you're American, they'll be like, hey, do you want a tip? And you know what I do.
Yeah. I'm sure you just same 0% with me. Yeah.
That makes me angry. Yeah. That makes me really mad at Italian people for the day when they do that. That brings our show to a close. I think we've put a nail in the coffin on tipping, and hopefully that's helped some of our listeners on how to tip and how much to tip. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Austin Black has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com, SIL, B as in boy, lawfirm.com. Tell us you want the question answered publicly on the podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody.